So when people start a new role, they often want to impress their manager or their leader the right way, but they're also trying to learn on the job, right? Or learn what the job is quickly. How can people who are starting a new job balance this, especially within those first crucial, usually it's like 60 to 90 days?
Yeah, that's a great question to start with because I hear this question a lot, even with the people that I coach. And my understanding over there is, and my own reaction as a leader is, yes, you have to impress your hiring manager. That is the bottom line. Reason being is they're the ones who are opening the doors for you. They are the ones who are helping you to prioritize your work, to tell you out of the 10 projects that were thrown in your direction, how do you prioritize them? Who do you work with? Who your stakeholders are? So I think your key for success is your manager. And I've seen enough research and interviews that I've done that that's where I feel the focus is. But to your question on balancing, yes, you have to make sure 80% of your time is connected with your leader. You're showcasing your progress with your leader. I've seen a lot of good intending people where they continue heads down, they keep on working, maybe they're even getting results, but they don't communicate enough. So, making sure your leader is on the same page as you, they're giving you the guidance, opening doors for you, that's where you get all the support from your leader. On the other hand, 20 to 25% of your time should be also taking that feedback from your leader and reaching out to your peers, reaching out to the people above you on the hierarchy, reaching out to people who you're supposed to collaborate with. Because a lot of projects, a lot of things that we do in the world today, they are cross functional. And if you really want to be successful, just doing your job by itself won't get you there. So making sure you're going step by step, making sure you're doing all the necessary must do activities, for instance, audit related training, audit related work that a lot of companies do, and your manager is completely updated with the work that you're doing.
What is audit related work?
Audit related work would be like, especially if you're in manufacturing, if you're in companies that work with government organizations, they expect you to be trained in certain things like OSHA related activities or certain compliance related work. Like in California, we have many compliance related trainings that every single employee has to go through. That's one of the things that's required by organizations for you to work in your job. And like I mentioned earlier in manufacturing, when you have to utilize certain tools, certain applications, they need you to be certified. So that's what I meant by audit related training, that those are the must haves. That is a must have for your job. Make sure you do it. Make sure you show your progress to your leader. And when in doubt, reach out to them. Your first 90 days are really going to help to set the stage for you.
What are some, so I love this, right? I was once in a job where I wasn't fully given everything I was expected to do in the first 90 days. It ended up costing me the job, right? And so, what questions should people be asking? They just started, it's their first week. What questions should you be asking your manager so that you're on the same page with them for those first 90 days?
It's stories like this that motivated me to do the research that I've done, to do the work that I've done, because I don't want anybody to go through that again, right? Because we work so hard leading up to a job interview. I want to make sure people use the same energy and the same motivation to create that success roadmap. So to answer your question, one of the most important things for you need to sit down and have one-on-ones with your leaders, as many as possible in the first 2 to 3 weeks. Reason being is they are the ones who can guide you. And like you said, not everything's in the job description. Not everything is told to you in that first day of orientation. The questions you can ask are firstly, prioritization. Every job that I've been to, no matter when I join, I have mostly heard people say, we wish you had joined yesterday, just because there's so much work there and so much needs to be done. With that kind of statement, it's a little bit of a giggle when somebody says that to you, but it hits you hard as a newcomer. You go like, oh my gosh, what am I not doing? Am I supposed to do 10 projects, right? So the main idea is work with your leader on prioritization, work with your leader on creating a stakeholder map. Very, very important, because especially the more senior you get, the more complicated your role gets, and especially if you're taking over somebody who might have left a job,
Mhm.
because they might have a good reputation, they might have missed out on some goals. How do you make sure you catch up? Who are the people you need to go back to and say, yes, so and so left, I'm joining this role, where can I help you? Especially if you're in a customer driven organization like HR, finance, sales, right? You need to make sure you're asking those questions to your leaders. And I was just listening to Indira Nuis, who was, the CEO of PepsiCo a couple of years ago, her training, and she was talking about what she did the first 90 days. At her level, she went out and met the customers. She went out and she made sure she's talking to her leaders regularly. So that's one of the things that I've seen helped me also, was to do make sure that once I have the list of people I need to meet with, I go out and do that. So asking questions is good thing. Applying what you've learned is the most important thing. And then closing the circle with your manager and communicating that this is the person I met. Here's the feedback we've got. What do you think? Are we all on the same page, right?
So what I'm hearing is that you're saying that during those first 2 weeks, chat with your manager about priorities. Like there's a
Mhm.
lot on the job description, but what's the priority, right? Or what are the
Mhm.
priority? Well, usually priority, but maybe the top three important things, right? In my mind.
Right.
Then the next thing is to ask the person, okay, who are the people I need to talk to in this role for me to be, for me to move this work forward? Because I also learned that kind of a little bit the hard way. It didn't cost me my job that time, but I learned a little bit the hard way. I ruffled a few feathers, but eventually things went well. But find out who the stakeholders are. And then you're saying have conversations with them and then circle back with your leader. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you summarized it great.
Wonderful. In your experience, what are some of the subtle mistakes that people can make or professionals can make during those early days that undermine their long-term success?
I would laser focus on one thing for this call, and that is lack of communication. And I can actually share my own experience with that, where I was hired as a director at a certain company. It was a tech company. As I mentioned earlier, the reactions I was getting is, oh, we wish you were here yesterday, which was great, but also showcased to me that there's a lot of work to be done. So I took the heads down approach, which helped me to build my project really fast, but it created confusion and anxiety within my collaborators because I was not sharing updates with them on a regular basis. It was a large scale company wide project. My leader was busy, so I thought, oh, I'll just give him an update when he's free, like in 3 weeks' time or 4 weeks' time. But I didn't realize that I should have done this every single week. Make sure, even if he doesn't have a one on one on my calendar, I put it for him. And that's another thing I tell people is yes, your leader wants to talk to you. Yes, your leader wants to support you, but they are busy too. So a one on one is your accountability. It's your responsibility. So make sure you take charge of that. Make sure you are ready to provide updates to your leaders and get their inputs, because not just the first 90 days, I think the first year for any new job, any new promotion, any new leader is so important. And that's where I think people need to be bit more proactive, which is the communication part. And you find ways of doing it. Slack your leader, or Teams chat, whatever. Give them regular updates and understand what do they want to see on a regular basis. Like a leader, one leader that I worked with always requested, could you please send me your agenda 24 hours in advance so that if you have questions that I need to prepare, I can be prepared, right? So I love that approach because it forced me also to think through, what do I want to do in this next 30 minutes, right? Because I have also seen people who reported to me where I would say in the agenda, oh, so what do you want to talk about today? Oh, no, nothing really, there are no updates since the last time we spoke. And it just felt like a very um, loosely done kind of a agenda, right? Like no agenda, literally. And as a leader, that frustrated me. So, those are some ideas that I feel all tie very well to communication and regular updates with your leaders.
So what I'm hearing is that be proactive, right? Be
Yes.
proactive when it comes to communicating with your leader, because ultimately that leads to that long-term success, right?
Right, right. And I would add to being proactive is create a plan. I worked with a leader who had an Excel sheet that showed bi-weekly updates that that person did, bi-weekly meetings or
Mm.
one-on-ones with people that they did. What are they going to focus on? If I'm presenting to, let's say, an executive leader, do I just show data or should I actually show something else? If I'm connecting with a peer who's a director level, what would they like to see? So even understanding your target audience is important because I've also seen people say, "Oh, I sent out that email. How come you didn't see the update?" And well, the reality is it was not customized for that group of people. Just because you sent an email doesn't mean they understood the updates that are happening, especially on your stakeholder map if that person has been identified as a very strong stakeholder, right?
You said something that triggered a thought. You talked about how sometimes you may be replacing somebody who has left.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, let's say that that previous person made a lot of mistakes and it was a whole dumpster fire, and you are walking into this dumpster fire, right? What are some ways that you can, because you're already walking into a situation that's bad. Like you said, like people say, "Oh, we wish you were here yesterday." And that could be because of what the other person did, which is why you now have this role. In corporate culture, I have seen, especially in the CEO world, that sometimes there's a CEO that's not doing well, and then another CEO is hired to try to come and clean up the mess. But unfortunately, that CEO ends up being set up for failure, and then they also have to go. But it's not because that CEO wasn't good or that replacement wasn't good. It was because of all the things that that person had to do. And you know, I'm talking about CEOs because I've read a lot about CEOs and this happening to them, but I'm very sure that this also happens at different levels, at various levels. So for that person that's walking into, you know, the best way I can describe it is a dumpster fire, what should they do to help them succeed? Every other Friday, I send out an email newsletter to about 3,000 PhDs and academics on tips, tools, and resources that you can use to build a career you love. And I'm inviting you to join us. You can go to theboldphd.com/careers list. Again, that's theboldphd.com/careers list. Let's get back into the episode. Or what can they do to help them overcome that that dumpster fire?
I have been in that situation, and in fact, I will share as a leader when somebody left in my organization, they had not done the best job also, and they had made some mistakes. There was a partner organization that we were working with, and they were very unhappy, and they were loud about it. When they were unhappy, they were very loud about it. So, what was happening is my organization was getting negative feedback that we are not working hard enough. We are not working with the customer. So, my job was to hire somebody in this role. When I hired that individual, I was very, very clear that we are having some problems. When you come into this role, the first 90 days, this is the only problem I want you to solve, which is building trust, building that communication channel with this organization that we're supporting, and making sure they start seeing your results because your team is working, but they're not communicating the results, right? They are not sharing and getting feedback on the direction that they're going. So, as a leader, the onus was on me to make sure when I hire somebody in this difficult situation, I give them clear idea about what's happening, not oversell it, help them see how they're making an impact by doing this work, right? Now, on the other hand, as I mentioned earlier, I was hired into a situation where my leader was not very open with me and did not share the past failures of my predecessor. And that caused me a lot of heartache. It cost me a lot of problems. But then I realized within 2 weeks of joining that now it's on me to make sure I ask the tough questions. Now that I'm here, Now that I've joined this organization and I have a team that's reporting to me, every customer I meet, I ask them these three questions: what worked well, what do we need to continue, and what do we need to stop? By framing my discussion with them in this direction, it gave them the permission to talk about what are the things that they like the team did and what are the things we have to change or pivot to immediately to support them. Now, I was very careful in not getting into um, a bashing match, right? And that can happen because they can say, your predecessor didn't do this, they didn't do that, right? And it can easily go downhill. That by creating a structure around these three questions, and in fact, I gave them heads up and I said, I will be asking these questions to you. It helped to focus those 60 minutes or 30 minutes on the answers I needed. It helped me to move forward and it helped to build the trust. Because the idea was we are not here to go through the old mistakes. We're here to create a strong future together and make sure that my team understands what are the areas they need to focus on.
So good. Thank you for that. And, I hope that that helps because I like how you said that it's on the onus is on the leader to share that you're walking into a situation that has been problematic and we are hoping that you come to solve this. And then I also, because my follow-up question was going to be, so what if the leader doesn't tell you? But I like how you share that even though the leader didn't let you know, you found a way. And so I guess doing those again, going back to those first 90 days or first 100 days, this is where you begin to chat with the stakeholders on hey, what worked, what didn't work, and what can we do better? I like that framework. And so that being said, this really segues perfectly into my question about company culture, right? In our world today, people are very concerned with company culture because they want to work at a place where they agree with the values, where or at least where they resonate with what's going on there, right? And sometimes it can be hard to know what is true and what's not true. Of course, now we have places like Glassdoor, maybe LinkedIn a little bit, where you could sort of get bits and pieces. But what are some other ways people could suss out company culture?
I would like to zoom in on one key thing
Mhm.
because that'll help people to understand the culture a little bit better, and that's decision making. And the reason I bring decision making to the top of this discussion is because when you enter a company and you don't realize, am I just supposed to share this update with my boss? Or are there three other players that need to see this? And as companies get more complicated, more collaborative, and collaboration is another word for five people need to understand what's going on instead of just you and your boss. And collaboration brings great ideas forward, but it also brings in lots of people who have something to do with that project, right? So you need to make sure you go back to them, you work with them, and you bring them into this decision making early. So, decision making is where I've seen people's roles are either successful or they get broken down really easily. Another example around decision making, I'll say, is what are the approval processes? Do you need two people to approve this before you move forward, or do you just need your manager to approve it? What other feedback do you need from different people, right, and different teams within the organization? So for instance, if I'm a software engineer and if I'm supposed to write a code, is the only person checking that is my boss, or do I need to actually show this code to three other software engineers before we move forward? That's another example. So for me, company culture boils down to decision making. And I would also add, how do they reward people? Or a simple question on how do we celebrate success? And I always tell people, as you're getting closer and closer to your interview process and you can see the green light towards the end of the tunnel, make sure you ask about how does the team celebrate success? Because that's another important piece where I feel a lot of teams achieve their goals, run fast, move fast, say thanks through an email, and then the next project comes. And what happens is burnout because people are going from one project to the other without seeing acknowledgement for their work and without seeing the rewards, right? So, as a leader, that's another feedback I always tell leaders is make sure you make time. And when you're proactive, that's good. But also make sure that you are reaching out to thanking everybody that was involved and maybe a simple lunch, maybe a Amazon gift card, whatever your company likes sending out, utilize that, right? So those are two elements that I would highly prioritize: decision making and how do you celebrate success in the organization.
Mm. And I like how, because my question was going to be for somebody who is not within the company, how would they know? But towards the end there, you just said to ask,
Yeah.
right? So you should ask, okay, who will I be in this role, who do I report to, or how many people have to see the work I'm doing in order for it to move forward? And also, how do we celebrate success? I like those questions. I like those questions a lot. Hey, did you know that I speak to and train groups at universities, colleges, and professional organizations on the topics I cover on this channel? I do. So if your group would like to bring me in virtually or in person to cover intentional career design, personal branding that builds your career, careers within scientific communications or biotech, go to theboldphd.com/speaking. Those are two questions. Is there another question that you would recommend people ask about company culture?
Well, I think there's another slight way of asking, let's say, in roles that you can say during the interview process, is this a new role or was there somebody already in this role?
Right.
And usually, if you just open up that door, the person on the other end, whether that's the recruiter or the hiring manager, will go into a story to say, yes, there was a role already, but that person found another role, whether inside the company or outside the company. So now we have this position open. Or they can say, this is a completely new role because now we are focused on developing people. Let's say for talent development or learning and development, the area that I'm good at, that's something that I've seen. And it gives me a lot of assurity that I'm going into a company that focuses on people development, that focuses on investing in people. So that question about the role and the history about the role is also helpful. But I will also caution people who are listening to this podcast is read the room, see how they are reacting to your questions about the company, about the role. Because if you get any kind of reaction from them that they don't want to talk about it or they don't want to deal with it right now, then you have to read between the lines. Is that somewhere do you still want to go? And in today's market, Gertrude, we are seeing a paycheck is important, right? People have to make some compromises in order to keep their homes running with so much going on in the world. So maybe you understand it and you still realize that, yes, this is the place I can get a job, but I need to be careful on how I go in and ask questions because there are sensitivities around it, and just be careful. That is also part of an emotional intelligence that you need to develop, and that's something I tell people. Just because you think something is a right question in your mind doesn't mean it's the right time to ask. So just be careful during the interview process. You don't want to, get them feeling that this person's not the right person. Just read the room, read the reactions, and just see what feedback you get, right? So that's during the interview. And once you've landed the job, that's another big key important part is highlighting your emotional intelligence by being mature and not asking all the questions in that one sitting, right? Just because you have a list of questions, that doesn't mean you ask them in one sitting. Just be cautious and go step by step.
Have you ever, in your personal, experiences, have you ever maybe joined a company and you read the room, you asked the right questions, but later on you found this is not a great fit?
Yes. In my upcoming book, there is a story where I actually talk about, oh my gosh, where am I? Kind of a situation. What did I sign up for? And we've all been there. If we haven't, that's great. I hope people don't have to go through it. But yes, it has happened to me where the company brand was huge in the market. The person that I was supposed to report to was amazing on paper, And the role was just, the job description was amazing. And when I joined the organization, I just realized it was not what it seemed on paper. I maybe had asked the right questions. Maybe they were smart enough to answer it in a way where I didn't read between the lines. But the reality was, the first week is when it hits you hard. But I also think, Gertrude, a lot of us don't want to see, rather, a lot of us want to see the good in people. We still think maybe there are things I can change in order to fit in. And I've seen more than ever that does not work. Either you're unhappy or somebody else in the team is unhappy. So once that happens, I think you should be careful. If you, I would say, have a very, very frank and honest discussion with your leader. I think that shows your maturity, that shows your emotional intelligence. And I know I'm talking a little bit more about emotional intelligence, but professional careers are successful when you have that as a strong foundation. And part of that is, let's see, if you've made a mistake, talk to your leader directly about it, what your expectations were, where do you think the gaps are, and if they have any recommendations to help fill those gaps, right? The last thing I'll say on this question is, I've seen people revert back to their old jobs because in the first 2 to 3 weeks they realize they've made a mistake, or if they had other offers in their hand, maybe they reach out to that company or that organization. But in order to save you from this heartache, I always say, keep on asking as many questions as you can beforehand, because these heartaches do happen. Have a plan B if possible, and make sure you don't burn any bridges, because every person you work with, they are important. You are learning from them, maybe learning what to do and what not to do, right? We've always had those experiences also. But hold on to it, right? And make sure professionally you're in touch with everyone you work with.
Don't burn bridges. And then emotional intelligence. So I know that for some people, emotional like the emotional intelligence is it's a fairly new concept in the corporate world, right? um and so I sometimes get the sense that not everybody has been able to practice that, right? Or was in an environment where they were taught that. Shweta, what are some, what are some tips that somebody can use to develop that emotional intelligence? What are some tips you can give to somebody like that who may struggle with that?
You're right. Emotional intelligence is a newer concept that we're hearing a lot in the corporate world. But for those of us, who've been around for 20 plus years, there was one word that always came up was maturity. Do you have the
Okay.
business maturity, right? So I think it is a new word, but it means very similar to that. Now, what does that look like? When I was younger in my professional journey, I always used to feel like I should speak up, right? I should always speak up. And a lot of people are taught that, and we've seen a lot of training say, yes, you should speak up. But I also think timing and positioning yourself is very important. And I didn't have that early on. I didn't have that maturity or EQ, sorry, early on. And it's only when I got feedback from my, well meaning mentors and my coaches that I realized that although my question that I'm asking is relevant, is pertinent to this discussion, but is the timing right? Or was that answered, 3 questions before and I was not listening? Or the way I asked the question seemed very aggressive or very, um, hitting on somebody's idea and blowing it out of steam. So the idea is, it's the how, the when, and the what. You need to make sure you target those things very carefully. And I say it, but as I'm saying it, there are times in my head that I'm going, oh, we just had 25 minutes and we had to get to the bottom of it, so I just blurted out the questions, right? Was that the right thing to do at that point? Did I catch somebody off guard in a group meeting, especially? Because a lot of leaders that I speak to and I coach, one of the inputs that I get from them is, we were in a group meeting and this person had a question, who's my peer or who's my senior. And the way they asked it, I felt very insulted. Or the way they asked it, I felt like they think I don't know what I'm doing, or they're questioning my data, right? So the idea is not to pause people, but rather help them move along. So, what can you say in a meeting that will help them to think through, maybe if they're not understanding a question, or help the team to move further? I have seen people where, let's say, if you're launching a new project, they'll just raise their hand and they'll say, "This is just another bling bling. I don't see the value in this." Now, how could if they asked the same question in a better way? They would have raised their hand and said, "Shweta, it's good to see this project come through. We had a similar effort a couple of years ago, and I know we had some problems launching it. What can we do as a team to make sure, we don't have the same mistakes again, right?" So the intention I understand, because that team member who raised their hand, I know them, right? And I know their intentions are good. But the way they asked in a group environment just didn't come across well for them and for the team and for the effort we were doing, right? So these are just some examples where you can think through in a better way how to ask that question and the tone of your question. And it makes a huge difference. One on one, I think people get away with a lot more. But when it comes to more than you and your leader or your team member in a group environment, be careful and how you ask those questions.
That was really good coaching because I think what one of the things I just picked from what you said is if you're going to, for instance, if you're going to object, then this is a place where people can easily run into trouble, right? Where you're going to object, start with praise, then the problem, then how do we solve this together? So that it's not like how are you going to solve this, right? But how are we going to solve this? So it's more like a group effort. I like that. So and a lot of the times you're right. It's in the way I remember facing a situation where there was somebody that was a prickly personality in the organization I was a part of, and she needed to know about my projects so that because it touched some products that she handled under her project management, a product management she was a product manager, so she handled that product and I was talking about it, but the way she would tell me made me so angry. It would make me so angry, and I remember butting heads in the very beginning, and that's why I was saying that in the very beginning of a certain role I had trouble with some stakeholders, and it was exactly this, that the issue could have been communicated better, but it wasn't. Instead, it was aggressive. Instead, it was like, this is my product. You can't write about it until I say so, and it wasn't a very good experience. I mean, later on that relationship kind of smoothed out. Once I was able to also be assertive and express my ideas. So, but for the person on the receiving end of this, right, talking about going back to emotional intelligence, and let's say that you have been on the receiving end of a rude question, right? What could the response be?
I'll share a story. And this is very interesting. This was in my mid career when I was much younger. And I walked over to a peer, and she maintained the website of our internal employee development efforts that we had. I walked over to her and I said, "Hey, so and so, I had a request for you, if that's okay. We need to get this updated. It's just an announcement on the website. These were the old days where they were much harder to code in." And she was the only one who knew it. And I asked, and she's a good friend. Went out for lunches together and everything. And I said, "Could you so and so just help update this? We need it by tomorrow morning." And she looked at me and without a smile, and she said, "Your emergency doesn't mean it's my emergency." And those words, like caught me off guard. As a friend, I didn't expect her to react that way. And I remember just freezing. I didn't know what to say. And I'm standing at her cubicle and I didn't know what to say. And my immediate reaction was, "Hey, so and so, I'm sorry. I know you have a lot going on." Like, I found myself apologizing a lot because I just realized the way she had reacted. And then I realized what had happened was she was in a just a week before she had gone to a training, and in the training somebody had said that somebody else's emergency should not be yours, so you should speak up. So basically the poor girl was actually just applying what she had learned, and I was the first person she applied it to, right? So she didn't mean it the way it came out, but it definitely caught me off guard. And in a situation like this, I think somebody would have reacted negatively. Somebody could have spoken loudly to her or said, "No, that's your job. You're supposed to do it," right? It could have become really bad. But I'm glad I cooled down. I helped her at that point to see, yes, you're important. Yes, your work is important. Maybe my timing is not right, but you need to help me do this, right? So that's what I walk away with in that time and moment. But a couple of days later, when I sat down with her and asked her, "Hey, what was that about? And tell me, what can I do better so that it doesn't feel like an emergency, but we are also getting messaging from seniors and it might be 24 in advance. What can I do to do a better?" So helping to change the direction of that conversation and helping to find a long term solution. Like, if I need her help on a regular basis, is there a long term solution we can work on, which is a process, right? So it just reminded me that yes, what she said was right. My emergency is not her emergency, but we are all connected, right? It's a systems approach within an organization. So if she is feeding my inputs into our final goal, which was the website, then we need to come to an agreement what that process looks like. So, just a quick example, and I just think not overreacting in that moment in time is important.
One of the things that you reminded me of was the fact that sometimes the other person may also be going through something. I mean, I think, especially if, and in your case, it was somebody who hasn't characteristically done that. And now they're saying something like, your emergency is not my emergency. And feel very jarring, but to always to consider the other person. And also, like you said, like you can bring the situation, you can de-escalate the situation. And I think that's great. For your new book, Navigate Your Career, you interviewed people, leaders at Amazon and the Boston Celtics, and people that have achieved a lot in the corporate world. For people that, especially in 2025, I feel like it's a slightly different world than it may have been 20 years ago. What are you seeing is a marker for success and growth within an organization today? Plus some
We have
markers.
seen a lot of
Mhm.
Sorry, we have seen a lot of changes for sure. Coming up to 2025, a lot of historical stuff happened that we were all part of with COVID, with changes in on-site versus remote versus hybrid. So I would say some of the changes that I've seen in 2025 from a work culture is, especially when people are joining new companies, to be very clear in asking them, what are the rules? If it's hybrid, how many days it is? If it's remote, what does that look like? What support do you give to your remote employees? Are you giving them just the hardware, which is the laptop and systems, or are you also helping them from a training perspective and commuting perspective? So there are a lot of things that you need to make sure you ask upfront before you sign that offer letter, and you understand what are the expectations of the organization. And one of the things that you need to be careful about is um, being proactive doesn't mean always nonstop talking to that person. But if somebody puts a 30-minute meeting on my calendar, I want to make sure they're prepared. I want to make sure they walk in with an agenda, and I want to make sure that they have a summary of what's next as we complete the meeting. So, whether you're remote, whether you're hybrid, or whether you're on site, following these rules are really important. And I love when people send me a follow up and they say, "This was a great discussion. Here's what I took from it, and here are the action items." Absolutely a must. And that's something I learned very early on in my professional career. I always do that so that we have a trail of our discussion, and then we can look back and use that for the next meeting we have. But it just helps people to be on the same page. So those are just some tips and tricks that you need to make sure you continue. Yes, 2025 has brought in a lot of changes in the workplace, but there are foundational elements that you can still use to make sure that you're seen as an achiever and you're seen as somebody who, the company says, oh, I'm so glad we hired her, right? And lastly, I would say, being in a job, getting a paycheck is one thing, but if you're really serious about growing your career, the most important thing, and I cannot stress this enough, is learn the business. I have been astonished with people who've been in companies for 10, 15 years. Maybe they are not in the product role, but them not understanding what the product is. What is our business? What markets are we in? So I would say to differentiate yourself, to see as that next leader, learn the business. And that's one of the most important things you can do.
And when you say learn the business, that's learn what the product is,
Mhm,
learn who your customers are, right?
mhm, mhm.
Learn what the revenue streams are. What
Yes.
else?
Yes, financials. Be part of the calls every time. And I learned this very late because I was not a finance major. I was not an MBA. And I thought maybe I don't need to do all this. And then I realized, wow, every time as a leader, when I'm creating people related goals, how do I make sure my business aligns with it, that my business needs to hire people in this region or in this talent, or they need to develop this skill set internally if I don't know which direction the business is going. So, understanding the business financials, getting onto that business call, and all those things are public. And then, if there's something you don't understand, find a mentor in your company. Find somebody who is vested in you. They need to know about you, especially when you join a new company. Tell them about your background, tell them what you're interested in, and be specific and say, hey, Gertrude, I would love to learn from you more about the products because you're handling these three products. Tell me more, right? I say, get a panel of mentors. Don't just say, I have one mentor and I'm happy. Be successful, have a goal in your mind. And if you're truly looking at something and saying, I want to lead this team in the next 2 to 3 years, then make those things happen.
Yeah. So your book navigates your career, right? The rules for I want to make sure I read everything correctly. It says navigate your career strategies for success in new roles and promotions. Who is the book for?
It's the book for, firstly, anybody who is joining a new job, joining
Hmm.
a new company, thinking of talent mobility internally for those people who have opportunities to move within the company from one role to the other, those people. And the most important is people who are promoted, who are taking on new roles. And that's when people make mistakes, right? They go like, oh, I know this company, I've been here 10 years, I was in marketing, now I'm getting into to be a director or a senior director, so nothing should change. But that's when I tell people, you still have to make effort. You still have to create a roadmap. So when you look at those people, those key people, basically this book is touching everyone. And a lot of it, what I'm talking about is communication, is about creating a process map. So even if you're mid-career or you're joining right out of college, this book is so important because it tells you the key things you can focus on, and it's a great reminder because a lot of people get comfortable and they don't apply these rules. So, this book is for anybody who is looking at being successful in their professional career.
When is the book coming out? Where can people find it?
Well, the people can find this book anywhere where books are sold. August 26th is when the book's coming out. We are ready with pre orders. In fact, one thing I do want to announce is I'm looking at getting at 500 pre orders before August 26th. And if we achieve our goal, I'll be actually sharing couple of additional books free of cost with people who have lost jobs in this market. And lastly, I'll be providing one on one two coaching sessions to three lucky winners. So, this is the time. Go out, buy your book, and reach out to me if you have any additional questions.
Absolutely, Dr. Shweta Miglani. I'm going to make sure to leave the links to the book, the links to your LinkedIn, for people to reach out to you. Any last words of wisdom for people that are starting new careers in 2025, or even somebody that maybe is currently going through a layoff?
Right. Let's go with the first, which is people joining new roles. I would basically say the rules are simple. The company wants to see you succeed, but they also need to see goals and results. So make sure you're focused on that. Make sure you don't get distracted and you prioritize your work. For those who have unfortunately lost their jobs or are looking at making those changes, I would say the amount of work you put in finding jobs, also make the same effort in asking the right questions about the culture, about the company, and then putting that same effort in creating a success roadmap.
So well, so wisely put. Thank you so much, Dr. Meglani. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you, Gertrude.